The Prime Minister has finally arrived in Ukraine and he's expected to meet the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
That's right. The Prime Minister arrived in Ukraine at about 7:45 this morning. He has come into the center of Kiev. He's in a hotel right now, in the last little while, in fact, where he's met members of the Indian diaspora. He's greeted them. He's not really addressed them in that sense. There is a small group, and we've been sort of speaking to them through the last couple of hours. So he's going to be in Kiev for less than 10 hours. He will, of course, be meeting the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. The Foreign Minister is over here, Dr. S. Jaishankar. The National Security Advisor, Ajit Doval, is here. The Foreign Secretary is over here. The Secretary West is over here as well. So essentially all of the foreign establishment, the ME External Affairs Ministry, the foreign policy establishment, they're all over here. It's quite clear to me that there is a message that India is trying to send by being over here. Whether that is in the form of a proposal which may be accepted by Ukraine or not, we don't know. But what I now understand is that by the end of the day, there will be something substantive which hopefully does emerge. We will, of course, be hearing from the Ukrainian side as well. We do expect a high-level press conference by the Indian side later on today. So we'll get an idea of what is really taking place. Whether everything has been stitched up or they're still talking, back-channel talks still going up in terms of any announcements which are made. Again, that's something that we'll need to look at. But the fact that the Prime Minister is over here with all of the leaders who I mentioned, and that he was in Moscow a couple of weeks earlier on, clearly establishes the fact that India has a political stake, a presence and an acceptance both in Russia and in Ukraine. Parmeshwar.
Right. Vishnu, you have been extensively also reporting regarding a different aspect, which is India's important defense relationship with Ukraine in addition to Russia. Now, Vishnu, is that likely to come up during this visit? What have you been picking up on?
Well, I mean, it does, that defense relationship does, in a sense, mark what India and our foreign policy is all about. We've got Russian-built frigates, right, of the Trishul and Tabar class, powered by Ukrainian gas turbine engines in service with the Indian Navy. And so while we talk to the Russians about servicing various aspects and sensors and weapons of those warships, the engines, which are gas turbine engines, among the finest in the world, are Ukrainian. And we want those service lines to continue. Not just these frigates, which I spoke about, but also of the Kolkata and the Visakhapatnam class. These are the most advanced destroyers that India operates. They have Ukrainian gas turbine engines. The Antonov 32 medium transport aircraft of the Indian Air Force, and we've got, we've got above 50 of them, which are very much a lifeline of the transport fleet of the IAF, are Ukrainian. So again, we want to ensure that those aircraft do remain serviceable because they are indispensable. So that defense relationship in some way, shape or form might come up. But I do hope that there is something out of the box in terms of an announcement which is made, where President Zelenskyy and Prime Minister Modi go in the city of Kiev, whether they will be seen together in a particular location, whether there would be a certain signaling on the basis of that. We are still to get details of. So we'll have to wait for a couple of hours. It's a short visit, so in the next couple of hours we'll know everything. But there will be a formal greeting of the leaders in the next couple of hours, which takes place. I will be over there, but it's, there may not be live images because of the security concerns. Everything is deferred and will be deferred in terms of visuals. So that's one aspect of this trip, which is different from other trips where Prime Minister Modi is involved, where instantly you've got footage of him. It's different right now, given the security concerns. There have been air raid sirens, all day yesterday. I believe some may have happened today. So this is a war zone. It certainly doesn't look like one. In Kiev, which is it's looking a lot more resplendent and a lot more functional than it was 2 years ago when I covered the war and I spent several days over here. Be that as it may, in the last 2 years and 900 plus days into this conflict and the loss of tens of thousands of lives on both sides, it's been devastating, not just for Russia and for Ukraine, but for the world.
Right. Also, Ukraine, Vishnu, as we speak, Ukraine has made massive incursions into Russia's Kursk region. But as you have been highlighting, it continues to lose in areas like Donetsk. Vishnu, can a swap of territory be considered as a potential peace proposal?
So that is the, that's the ultimate question. It is basically seen that Ukraine's incursion into the Kursk region, which is to the north of Sumy, which lies well to the north of Kiev, where I am right now, is a tactical move to relieve pressure from what is happening in the Donetsk and Lugansk region, where the Russian forces have steadily been moving westwards. So by trying to open up a new front, and they've done that successfully, the effort is to get Russia to redeploy their soldiers in the east and therefore give Ukrainian soldiers in the east that much more of an ability to push further east and try and regain territories which they've lost. But whether that might end up being some sort of a swap, as in Ukraine comes out of Kursk, in exchange Russia moves further east and out of areas where they have occupied in Ukraine, and whether India is conveying that as a message is something we don't know at this stage. But ultimately that may well be part of any formula. It just makes sense because it doesn't seem likely that Ukraine would necessarily want to physically and indefinitely occupy the 1,000 odd square kilometers of Kursk that they presently are occupying, because it's a huge resource crunch. Soldiers haven't been being deployed over there, infrastructure, machinery, etc., etc. So that's something that needs to be looked at very closely.
Right, indeed. Well, the symbolism and balancing act aside, as Vishnu is also reporting, the Prime Minister's visit to Ukraine, the first by an Indian Prime Minister, will focus on areas of cooperation in defense, trade, with India actually operating a large inventory of military equipment of both Russian and Ukrainian origin. But in terms of the plan of action, Vishnu, today, what is set out in the next 10 hours? What can you disclose to our viewers regarding the plan of action for our Prime Minister and the President of Ukraine?
Parmeshwar, I wish I could disclose more, but what I can say is that it's going to be substantial. And I can also say that it's being tied up as we speak right now.
Right.
Usually these visits by foreign leaders are tied up days in advance. I would suggest that perhaps 95% of everything has been tied up, but the final 5% hasn't been. What is that going to be? I do believe that there would be a significant gesture by India. I do believe that this is going to be something warmly accepted by Ukraine. But what that is something we're going to have to wait for. But ultimately, more than that gesture, which will be substantive, will be substantial, is whether any proposal by India to Ukraine, to try and get onto that table in right earnest to bring an end to this conflict, whether that's accepted and whether there is a message which Prime Minister Modi picks up here, which can be conveyed to the Russian side. That's ultimately what we need to wait and see.